A very good afternoon to all of you. I welcome our esteemed guest, Advocate Chetan Dhoreji, to deliver his address to our students. Before I request him to start his address, I want to tell you that Law Center 1 has been celebrating its glorious 50th year in this year. So we have been organizing a series of lectures to celebrate this our 50 years. This lecture is also in that series of lectures. So I welcome you, sir, for this purpose and for delivering a lecture. Now, before I request you, I introduce very briefly your accomplishments, and which is very relevant for us also. Advocate Chetan S. Dhore is a practicing advocate at Bombay High Court and various other places, tribunals, etc., including the Supreme Court of India. He has also worked as visiting lecturers. That is very important for us. So you have worked as a visiting lecturer at Dr. Ambedkar College, Diksha Bhumi, and G.H. Raisoni School of Law, Nagpur. He has been invited by many institutions to deliver his address on various subjects of law. Now, when we have invited him, we have requested him to deliver on Arbitration Act of the country with a special view of the its analysis, as well as the recent amendments which has been done in 2019. So, without wasting time, over to you, Chetanji.
Thank you, madam. At the outset, I would like to thank all the organizers for giving me an opportunity to give you students an insight in the Arbitration and Conciliation Act of 1996 with special reference to the amendments which were brought in by the Legislature of India in the year 2016 and 19. Now, good afternoon, students. Before we venture into the business of examining and elaborating the provisions of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act, I would like to give you a brief idea and history about the Arbitration Act. You know what? In ancient India, there was a system of dispute resolution even at the village level. We specifically know this system as panchas and panchayats. Now, what used to happen was, if the order of panchayats were not followed, the members who were defaulting, the panchayats used to exclude them, excommunicate with them, and they were refrained from taking part in social activities and religious activities. But with the incoming of British government, Britishers in India in the year 1600, Britishers brought in the concept of arbitration in the courts which were established for the purposes of dispute resolution within India by the Britishers. Now in 1600, way back as of now, in 1600, the Britishers said that, look, there will be a concept of arbitration for resolution of dispute, but that would only be administered through courts of law. Like as we know today, the arbitration happens outside the courtroom. Arbitration is an extra legal, outside the courtroom system. But in those days, in 1600, when the Britishers brought the concept of arbitration, the power to arbitrate upon a dispute was exclusively with the courts where the suits were filed. Accordingly, with the development, the Britishers brought in two ways of resolving the dispute. That is, they had separate laws for dealing with disputes between Hindu parties, and they had separate laws for dealing with disputes relating to the Muhammadan community. Now, accordingly, what happened? In the year 1859, the British government brought in a new law of procedure called Civil Procedure Code in 1859. And in the Civil Procedure Code itself, they incorporated certain provisions relating to arbitration, and they said, look, whatever will happen in the court of law in the nature of arbitration would be governed by the rules which were incorporated in CPC 1859. But with subsequent development, English Arbitration Act was brought into existence in 1938. And in 1938, the government of India thought that, look, whatever procedure for arbitration we already have, which is established by the Britishers in our country, is not sufficient. And therefore, they tried to bring in a new law of arbitration, and that Arbitration Act was the Arbitration Act of 1940. with this history, you know, the Arbitration Act of 1940 specially dealt with only the concept of dispute resolution by way of arbitration. I may remind you that the law which we are discussing today and we are governed by is essentially different. It is Arbitration and Conciliation Act of 1996. On the contrary, the earlier act which has been replaced by this new law was known as only the Arbitration Act of 1940. So the concept of conciliation was not existing in the year 1940, and there was no concept of conciliation recognized by the legislature. So 1940s Act played a pivotal role till 1995 within the territory of India. However, with the advent of globalization, commercial contracts, commercial markets, financial disputes, financial matters, financial developments in the country as well as globally, it was found that there are certain anomalies and shortcomings in the Act of 1940. And therefore, in the year 1994, beginning from then, you may please keep in mind that the government of India thought it appropriate to absolutely replace the Act of 1940 and to bring in a new law on the concept of arbitration and to include for the first time in law the concept of conciliation. And therefore, in the year 1996, Arbitration and Conciliation Act of 1996 came into existence. The Parliament passed this law, President gave its assent, and accordingly the law was brought into existence. Now, the Act of 1996 till 2014 and 15 was continued with the then existing provisions. Now, let me just give you a brief idea of how the model of Act of 1996 is based. Now, this Act of 1996, before it was enacted, we already had a model law of United Nations Convention on International Trade Law. We specifically call it UNCITRAL or UNCITRAL. Now, this 1985 model law of UNCITRAL was very much of help, great help for the Indian legislature to enact a law on the concept of arbitration and conciliation. And accordingly, whatever is being mentioned, whatever you see in the Act of 1996 is absolutely based on the concept of international trade, which is explained in the UNCITRAL model of law 1985. And accordingly, the provisions are enacted. Before I went into the nitty-gritties of the provisions of the Act of 1996, let me tell you something that in the years where Supreme Court and the several high courts were, seized with the matters as to whether the 1996 Act can be interpreted. When I call it 1996 Act, I am talking about the recent law on arbitration and conciliation. When I call it 1940 Act, I am essentially talking about the act which was enacted in the year 1940. Now, the question before the High Courts and Supreme Court was whether while interpreting the provisions of Act of 1996, can the courts take help of the provisions of Act of 1940? Because essentially, virtually, the subject was same, that is arbitration. However, the question was very well established, very well explained by the Honorable Supreme Court in one case which is named as P. Anand Gajapati Raju versus PVG Raju, which was decided in the year 2000. The Honorable Supreme Court said that, look, Act of 1940 and Act of 1996, they stand on different footing. The circumstances in which the Act of 1940 was brought in existence and the circumstances on which the Act of 1996 is brought in existence are different. The laws are different. Though the subject appears to be same, while interpreting the provisions of Act of 1996, you cannot take help of the provisions of Act of 1940. And this was reiterated by the Honorable Supreme Court in Sundaram Finance Limited versus NEPC India Limited. And the Honorable Supreme Court made it very clear that 1940 Act and 1996 Act are two different laws. The courts should not confuse themselves while interpreting the provisions of these two laws. Now, given this, let me first tell you the scheme of the Act. The Act is essentially divided into four parts. Okay, we are now discussing the provisions of 1996 Act. This 1996 Act was twice amended by the Indian Parliament. And these two amendments were of the year 2016 and 2019. I don't want to go into when the bills were presented, when the bills lapsed. What is important for us is to discuss what are the amendments which were brought in existence, number one, and number two, what were the existing provisions of the Arbitration Act of 1996, which are primarily of importance for a student of law to understand, because we will also be discussing the opportunities for you students after you finish the studies in law school. Now, let me tell you that there are 4 parts of the Arbitration Act of 1996. Subsequently, that is in the year 2019, another part is added, and that is part 1A of the Arbitration Act, again, which we will discuss later on. Now, part 1 of the Arbitration Act essentially talks about the process of arbitration. Okay. Now, it says that there are several chapters, there are several provisions pertaining to definition clause, various phrases which are used in the Arbitration Act. Then it talks about what is arbitration agreement. Then it talks about judicial extent of intervention in the process of arbitration, so on, and number of arbitrators, appointment of arbitrators, how the proceedings will proceed, whether there will be an opportunity of hearing or not, how the award will be drafted, how statement of claim and defense will be drafted, so on and so forth. I would want to advent and venture only into the essential sections of this particular law with the amendment. Now, let us try to understand that in a layman's language, arbitration is a process whereby 2 or more parties try to say that their relationship will be governed by a particular procedure, and if at all a dispute arises, they would not knock the doors of the court, but they would sit independently, appoint a third person who is not essentially a court to resolve the disputes between them. Now, in order to analyze these provisions, there is a technique to understand that, first of all, liberty is given by the legislature to the parties to a dispute to set up procedure for resolution of their dispute. So the resolution of dispute between the parties by way of arbitration, primarily speaking, is essentially governed by the procedure prescribed by those parties itself. Okay, but that procedure which the parties agree upon cannot go beyond what is legislated upon in the Act of 1996. So the Act of 1996 lays down a framework for the parties to set up their procedure mechanism in which their dispute will be resolved. And therefore, Section 2 of the Arbitration Act first defines certain phrases like who is party, what is arbitration, what is an arbitration agreement, what is international commercial arbitration, what is domestic arbitration, so on and so forth. Now, to understand, you have to first analyze that there are 2 types of arbitrations which are recognized by the Indian Parliament. First is domestic arbitration, second is international commercial arbitration. As a layman, let us understand that domestic arbitration essentially is pertaining to the domestic parties, that is within the territory of India, and governed by domestic laws. On the contrary, on the other hand, international commercial arbitration would essentially mean that there is one of the parties which is not domestic but international, and or that is governed by some international law. And this Act of 1996 says when a particular dispute between the parties is an international dispute, then there is a separate procedure laid down in Part 2 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act of 1996. The Part 2 describes about New York Convention and Geneva Convention. I mean, when the award is an international arbitral award, then that award can be enforced in consonance with the provisions of Part 2 of this particular Act of 1996. We will go into that later on. So the Section 2 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act first defines various phrases which are used in the Act. Then you pay attention to Section 5 of the Arbitration Act. Now, Section 5 of the Arbitration Act clearly says that there would be minimal intervention of the judiciary, of the courts in the process of arbitration. Now, why arbitration as a concept has evolved globally? Arbitration is evolved because it is inexpensive, It is less time consuming compared to the court procedures. Say, for example, party A enters into a contract for 100 crores with party B. And suppose in future there arises a dispute. Will it not be very difficult for any of the parties to approach the court? First, they will have to pay court fees. Second, they will have to fight in the court of law. For you know the procedure in India that it might take years and years together. Then there is an appeal, there is second appeal, there is special petition, execution, so on and so forth. And the commercial parties where high stakes are involved cannot venture themselves into the normal course of court proceedings. And therefore, the concept of arbitration has come into existence. So the legislature on the model of UN Citral 1985 thought it appropriate to specifically mention in the act itself that, look, whenever there is an arbitration, the courts, the judiciary must not interfere unless it is expressly provided in the statute itself. So there are instances which I will tell you right now where the courts of the country can intervene in the proceedings of arbitration. But what is the rule? The rule is that the courts must not involve themselves in the process of arbitration unless and until it is specifically provided for in the Act of 1996. Now, what are the essential provisions which permit the courts of law to interfere in the process of arbitration? Immediately after Section 5, let me tell you about Section 8. Now, Section 8 is very important. As a student of law of arbitration, you must understand that whenever there arises a dispute before the court of law, suppose party A files a suit for recovery of 10 lakh rupees against party B before a say civil court of Delhi. Okay, now the civil court of Delhi's duty is to first find out whether in the contract of A and B there is an arbitration clause. If there is an arbitration clause, if there is an arbitration agreement, Section 8 after Section 5 essentially says that the court must refer the parties to the arbitration. That is, the court cannot seize itself with the matter, cannot proceed with the suit because there is an arbitration clause. And the court will have to direct the parties, look, you have an arbitration clause which is valid, and please go before the arbitrator and get your disputes resolved. Right? So this is the first stage where the courts come in picture and say that you cannot approach us, you go before the arbitrator. Then comes Section 9 of the Arbitration Act. I'll give you an example. Suppose there is an arbitration agreement between two parties, X and Y. Now, the contract between X and Y is this, that X gives a contract to Y that you construct a building, four-storied building for me, and the cost of the construction and the project would be 10 crore rupees. Now, for this 10 crore, X asks Y to give a bank guarantee. So what is the concept of bank guarantee? That, look, I am doing work for you. You are giving me work, but keep this bank guarantee. Tomorrow, if I do not do your work properly, I am giving an example in layman's language. Tomorrow, if I do not do your work properly, you please keep this as security. This is called as the contract of bank guarantee. Now, before the project is completed, there arises dispute between X and Y. Now, Y wants to go in arbitration, invoke the arbitration clause. Now, what will happen? Y knows that my bank guarantee is with X. And if I initiate a dispute, I invoke the arbitration clause, X might encash my bank guarantee. Excuse me. That is, X might encash the bank guarantee, and whatever amount is guaranteed by me by way of this bank guarantee contract will be encashed by X. And therefore, what Y will do, because arbitration has not yet begun, arbitration is yet to start, the X party Y will knock the doors of the court and file an application under Section 9 of the Arbitration Act saying that, look, I have a contract with X, and X has entered into a contract, taken my bank guarantee. No doubt there is an arbitration agreement, but because the arbitrator is yet to be appointed, my lord, kindly grant me interim relief. What do they call it? Section 9 is known as interim relief, etc. by the court. It is the marginal heading of Section 9. I repeat, interim relief, etc. by the court. So what Section 9 says? Section 9 says any party to the arbitration agreement before, during, and after the arbitration, but before the award is enforced. Matlab, there are three stages. One, that section 9 before the court can be invoked before the arbitrator is appointed, before arbitration has begun. And section 9 also says that during the proceedings of arbitration, suppose something which does not fall within the jurisdiction of arbitrator, still the party can approach, knock the doors of the court and say, look, I want interim relief. And third is, when the award is passed, but the award is not enforced by the competent court in view of section 36 of the Arbitration Act, then the party can knock the doors of the court and say, look, that this award is pending, or that arbitration tribunal is not set yet, so kindly grant me interim relief. What interim reliefs can be granted? Section 9 specifically makes mention of 8 to 9 grounds on which interim relief can be granted. So interim relief in the matters of arbitration is the discretion of the court only when the party proves that there is inherent danger to my interest if the interim relief is not granted till the appointment of arbitrator. Now let us take a pause here. You know, before 2016, more specifically 2019, that is the 2 years when amendments were brought to the Arbitration Act, parties used to approach the courts and take interim reliefs and enjoy the interim relief till, delay the appointment of arbitrator. This was specifically noticed by the Indian Parliament after various judgments of High Court and Supreme Court and recommendations which were provided by Honorable Justice Shri Krishna's committee, the then judge of Honorable Supreme Court. He was appointed as the chairman of the committee to suggest, to recommend changes in the Arbitration Act of 1996. And on his recommendations, these recommendations were recognized by the Honorable Supreme Court in one judgment of 2018, when the amendment itself was not brought in existence. So the recommendations were so pivotal and important that the Supreme Court had considered those recommendations. Keeping that aside, Section 9 came to be amended in the year 2019. And what is the amendment now? The amendment is, look, you cannot take interim relief and enjoy it till the time you want to enjoy it and delay the appointment of arbitrator. Now you can enjoy the remedy under order under section 9 only for 90 days after it is awarded after the order is passed by the competent court. Which means what? Within the period of 90 days from getting order of interim relief from the court, you must take efforts to appoint an arbitrator. And if the arbitrator is not appointed, the order which is granted under section 9 must lapse. Okay, so the rider is put by clause 2, which is subsequently added to the Arbitration and Conciliation Act of 1996, which makes it apparently clear, that now you cannot enjoy section 9 at your whims and measures. Section 9 order can only be enjoyed till the period of 90 days from the date on which the competent court of original jurisdiction grants you order of interim relief. Now with this section 9, and before moving to other sections, section 9 matches with section 17 of the Indian Arbitration Act of 1996. Now what is it? Section 9 is generally before the arbitral tribunal is appointed. The parties approach the court. And section 17 is after the arbitration tribunal is appointed. Suppose the section 9 order is passed and within 90 days the arbitration tribunal is constituted. Now that section 9 order of interim relief and stay will not be applicable. The application again will have to be moved before the arbitrator, because now who is holding the jurisdiction of the dispute? The dispute is being held by the competent arbitrator appointed by the parties. And this arbitrator will now decide whether interim relief is necessary or not, whether the party needs to be protected or not. And while deciding an application under section 17, the law is very clear that the arbitrator must not be influenced by the observations and findings of the court under the order of section 9. So this is the independence given to the arbitrator in the Arbitration and Conciliation Act. So now let me take you back to the provisions. Section 5 says extent of judiciary must be minimal, intervention must be minimal. Section 8 says that parties must be referred. 9 says interim relief can be granted but cannot be enjoyed beyond 90 days. 17 says that court should not be, arbitrator should not be influenced, right? This is how the interim reliefs are granted. Then comes another instance of interference by the court in the matters of arbitration, and that is section 11. And before section 11, let me tell you students that there is a provision which mandates as to how many arbitrators must decide the dispute. It says there shall be a sole arbitrator unless otherwise agreed by the parties. Which means what? That if the parties have not agreed on the number of arbitrators, the number of arbitrator would be 1. There will be a sole arbitrator. Who will decide the name of the arbitrator? It is initially for the parties to decide the arbitrator. But if they fail to decide the arbitrator, they can knock the doors of High Court or Supreme Court, as the case may be, under section 11, which talks essentially about appointment of arbitrators. Now it says that if a party approaches Honorable Supreme Court for appointment of arbitrator, the first and foremost thing which has to be proved, I mean High Court or Supreme Court, whoever is approached, the first and foremost thing to be shown is that there exists a valid arbitration agreement between the parties. Now, what is valid arbitration agreement? That the arbitration agreement is not brought in existence by way of fraud, undue influence, so on and so forth, which you students have specifically studied in Indian Contract Act of 1872 in your first year student studies of law, right? So the riders which are given for the valid essentials of valid contract are pari materia mutatis mutandis applicable to the arbitration agreement, because arbitration agreement is also an agreement in the language of Indian Contract Act of 1872, and therefore in order to be valid, it must comply with the terms and conditions of the provisions of Indian Contract Act 1872. Now suppose the person approaches for appointment of arbitrator to Supreme Court or High Court. The provision says that, look, you have to prove 2 things. One, that there is a valid arbitration agreement. Second, that you had requested the other party to appoint an arbitrator, but both the parties could not arrive at one name for the appointment of arbitrator. That is, the appointment of arbitrator between the parties at their level has failed, and therefore now they have approached the court. So what is the duty of the court? 2015 and 19 amendment clearly states the duty of the court is only to see whether there exists a valid arbitration agreement or not. So for example, tomorrow you become a lawyer and I approach you as a client, okay, and I say that, look, Mr. X has not complied with the terms of contract, but there is arbitration clause. What to do? I requested him to appoint Mr. P as an arbitrator, but he is not agreeing. Your suggestion to me would be, let us approach the Honorable High Court seeking appointment of arbitrator under section 11, and you will approach the High Court with my affidavit. Now in the affidavit, what is required for you as a lawyer to do is this: you will only plead about existence of the arbitration agreement, validity of the arbitration agreement, formal contents of the agreement, and how the other party has failed in appointment of arbitrator. Mind you, students, in appointment of arbitrator petition under section 11, you cannot litigate upon the facts and law of the case. You cannot litigate upon the actual dispute involved between the parties, because section 11 petition is merely an administrative power of the High Court or Supreme Court. They are not sitting in the judicial power to decide the dispute, but only thing they have to do is to decide whether there is a necessity for appointment of arbitrator or not. So what the amendment of 2016 and 19 makes it clear? It makes it clear that the duty of the court is to only check whether the arbitration agreement is valid or not, and not to go into the merits of the case. It is not required for High Court or Supreme Court to go into merits of the case, right? So now, as we are also simultaneously discussing amendments, let me tell you what I told about section 11 is what was existing since 1996, okay? But in the year 2019, an amendment is brought to that provision, and a subclause is added, subsection is added. What it says? It says that now 2019 onwards, the High Court or Supreme Court, while exercising their power under Section 11 of the Act, must have reference to Part 1A, which is also added in the year 2019. What is Part 1A? Part 1A, for the first time in India, talks about, please pay attention, it is something which is very important, the institutionalized arbitration in India. What is institutionalized arbitration? What is institutional arbitration? Earlier, you know, when 1996 Act was brought into existence, there was also some rules relating to International Center, Indian Center for Arbitration, right, which is at Delhi. Now, this particular center is an institute for arbitration. What is the importance of this center? The importance of this center is to, you know, initiate steps to develop India on the global market for international arbitration. But unfortunately, it was found that this particular body could not discharge its functions to the satisfaction which was required. And therefore, in 2019, the Parliament of India amended the Act of 1996 and added new part which essentially talks about establishment of Arbitration Council of India. Let me repeat, it is Arbitration Council of India. Now, with this Arbitration Council of India, prospects for those who want to develop in the faculty of arbitration are more and more. I will explain that at the end of this video. Now, with the advent of this, Section 11 of the Arbitration Act now says that, look, whenever you, the Honorable Supreme Court or High Court, is approached by a party under Section 11 for appointment of arbitrator, please have regard to the institutionalized center of arbitration, that is Arbitration Council of India. What is the function of Arbitration Council of India? The function is twofold. Number one, to recognize the institutions which can be called arbitration institutions. One. Two, to recognize whether the arbitrators who are sitting in those institutions are proper or not, whether they are competent or not to discharge their functions under the Act. So, identification of the institutes and gradation of the arbitrators, twofold idea, twofold objective to be achieved by the Arbitration Council of India. So, Arbitration Council of India will monitor these two things. It will recognize the institutes. Second, it will see whether the persons who are arbitrators therein are competent enough to be called as arbitrators, to function as arbitrator or not. So now, as on today, Section 11 stands very clear that when the High Court or Supreme Court is approached, please have reference to the Arbitration Council of India's part and please see whether an arbitrator from there can be appointed or not. So this is called as the concept of institutionalized arbitration. Institutional arbitration. I am not sure whether you have heard of it or not. There were only two countries which were very famous for institutional arbitration. One was Singapore. Singapore's International Center for Arbitration, SICA, SIC. And then the country was, Hong Kong. Hong Kong had a system of institutionalized arbitration, but it was later on realized by the courts in India and the Parliament that, look, it is very important that in order to grow and to make India a hub for arbitration, which is the objective and recommendation of Honorable Justice Shri Krishna's committee, which has brought in amendment in 2019, that, look, we have to make India a hub of arbitration. Now, in such situations, you must have a statutory recognition. You must have a statutory body which will recognize these institutions and these arbitrators. And that body, mind you, is added by way of Part 1A of the Act of 1996, and this is called as Arbitration Council of India. So, Arbitration of Council of India is also discussed in schedules which is attached to the Act and is also discussed under Section 11. So, we have discussed that now. Then comes, there are several provisions which talks about how the appointment of arbitrator can be challenged or not. But mind you, for the present purposes, I would not go into that. Let us now see what Section 17 says, which I have expressly told you. Once again, I am reminding you in the course that Section 17 is again like Section 9, which is interim relief before the arbitrator. Section 9 was interim relief before the court. 17 is before the arbitrator. Then the most important provision which was called in question before the Supreme Court of India and Delhi High Court especially was Section 20. Now, you know, Section 20 essentially is a very simple provision. It, you know, talks about the place of arbitration, right? So where should be the place of arbitration? Now, Section 20, while interpreting the language of Section 20, the Honorable Supreme Court, in a very famous decision of the year 2001, Sanchin Chemicals, Supreme Court said that venue of arbitration and place of arbitration are two different phrases. They cannot be confused with each other. See, I mean, as a layman, I would never have, you know, given it a thought that venue and place have a different connotation. But as you know, while we interpret the law, the most essential and important thing is to understand the cognitive expressions of each and every word which is used in law. So we give lot of impetus to full stop, commas, words, their different meanings while interpreting the law. So what does it say? That while place of arbitration is always one, the venue of arbitration can be different. It can change. It was decided by Honorable Supreme Court in 2001 in Sanchin Chemicals case. So it made very clear way back in 2001, that is 19 years ago, that place of arbitration and venue of arbitration must not be confused, right? So these Sanchin Chemicals or, you know, your McDonald's case, these are all cases wherein the international arbitration was in question before the Honorable Supreme Court and High Court. Now there came another case in 2018, which is 2014, I'm sorry. This 2014 case is Enercon GAM versus Enercon Energy. Enercon versus Enercon is what specifically we call it. So Enercon versus Enercon, the Supreme Court once again said, making reference to Sanchin Chemicals, that look, the venue of arbitration and seat of arbitration, these are again two different words. They cannot be confused with each other. See, you know what? While the venue, place, or seat of arbitration comes in question only when, you know, generally speaking, in the matters of international arbitration. So in the matters of international arbitration, the parties might agree that, look, the venue of arbitration should be X place. But, you know, the place of arbitration might be different. So that is in detail Supreme Court has expressed in Sanchin, Enercon, McDonald's, Balco, Bhatia, so on and so forth. There were several other cases in which the Honorable Supreme Court has taken cognizance of the language used in Section 20, right? So with Section 20, now we move on to Section 23, which is important. Now, Section 23 is amended in the year 2019, right? What Section 23 is, let me explain. So whenever there is no arbitration agreement, and if I want to recover 10 lakh rupees from one person, okay, he is not giving me the money. What do? I file a civil suit for recovery of 10 lakh rupees in accordance with the provisions of Civil Procedure Code and Indian Contract Act. Okay. Now I file a civil suit. What do? When I file a civil suit, I write my pleadings on a piece of paper, support it with affidavit. That bunch is called as plaint. We call it as PLAINT, plaint. Plaint is what I am pleading before you. And plaint is always accompanied with a prayer that, look, I want this from the court. Okay. Now you file a plaint. Summons is issued to the defendant. Defendant appears before the court and he files a reply to your allegations in plaint, which is called as written statement. So what is it? It is a written statement. And you must be aware that for filing of written statement, there is a statutory limit provided under Order 8 of the Civil Procedure Code, which talks about written statement. Okay, so time limits are prescribed in the Civil Procedure Code. Now, the plaint which you file before the court, in a layman's language, is called as statement of claim before the arbitrator. Right? What do? What do you write? You write your pleadings, facts of the case. You plead your case, and then you pray for something. That is called a statement of claim. And the defense, the reply, which we call in civil court as a written statement, here we call statement of defense. Okay, so plaint, statement of claim is same as your plaint, and written statement is same as your statement of defense. The point is, as I told you, there is a time limit prescribed under CPC for filing of written statement. But mind you, students, when the Act of 1996 was brought in existence, the time limit for filing of statement of claim and written statement was not provided for. Why it was not probably provided? Because the framers at that time might not have understood or considered, because the advent was that arbitration is essentially to be governed by the procedure agreed upon by the parties themselves, right? So the parties will decide. But no, it was found subsequently for all these years that they are inordinately delaying the process of arbitration, which is frustrating the object of arbitration. Object of arbitration is speedy disposal of matters, right? So therefore, they have now prescribed time limit under section 23. So they say that the pleadings should be completed within 6 months before the arbitrator. This is added in the year 2019 by the Indian Parliament. And this was added by way of subsection 4 to the section 23 of Act of 1996. What is the amendment? The amendment clearly prescribes time limit of 6 months for completing pleadings. Pleading means plain and written statement, order 6 of Civil Procedure Code. So here pleading would mean statement of claim and statement of defense. Within how many days you have to complete this? You have to finish this process within 6 months. And in this connection, let me tell you that the Act is further amended, and it says that the award of the arbitration must be filed within 1 year. I will explain that later on when it comes. Now we move on to section 27. Section 27 is one such provision, where again the court comes in picture. Otherwise, courts cannot come in picture. Section 27, the Act says that suppose an arbitrator is not able to take evidence in the matter. Just take an example, because evidence would be required. And at this stage, I would also want to tell you that there is a provision in Arbitration Act which says that the law of Civil Procedure Code and Evidence Act would not be applicable to arbitration proceedings. But Honorable Justice Dhanuka, in one judgment of Honorable Bombay High Court, and based on several decisions of the Honorable Supreme Court, has said that undoubtedly the Act clearly states that the CPC and Evidence Act would not be applicable. However, the general rules of pleading and evidence would still be applicable to the procedure of arbitration, right? Which means that strictly CPC cannot be made applicable, strictly Evidence Act would not be made applicable. But what are the general rules of evidence? What are the general rules of pleading will be still applicable. It is very well held by Supreme Court and several high courts time and again since 1996. Now, section 27 says, suppose the arbitrator is not able to take evidence, and or suppose parties want Mr. Y to be examined before the arbitrator, but he is not coming. Now, what arbitrator can do? Arbitrator can just send a requisition, which you call summon before the court. Summons, right? So requisition, if not followed by a person, then arbitrator cannot do anything. On the contrary, if a summons is issued by a competent civil court, and if that summons is not followed, there are severe punishments which follow under CPC. You might be taken into custody, so on and so forth. So what happens? Section 27 takes care of this. Suppose a party or the arbitrator approaches the court, says that, look, I am the arbitrator or I am the party, arbitration is going on, we don't know how to take evidence, or that this particular person is not coming, kindly call him for evidence, and you take the evidence. The court, upon being satisfied that there is an arbitration agreement, that the proceedings are still going on, the court will call that person. Either it will ask that person to directly give evidence before the arbitrator, or it will record the evidence for arbitrator and submit the evidence to the arbitrator. Now, if you look at it jurisprudentially from the angle of philosophy of law, what is the court doing under section 27? The court is essentially doing an clerical work, administrative function. It would not be appropriate to call it clerical work, but in layman's language we can call it. What is court doing? Court is merely gathering some data and submitting it for the decision of the arbitrator. Court is not giving decision on the basis of evidence collected by it. It is submitting it. It is helping the arbitrator, with the evidence, and now you have the evidence, you decide what you want. This is section 27 where the court comes in picture. Okay, then as I told you that section 29A is added in the year 2019, which is 2016, which is very important. The 2016 amendment, section 29A, clearly states that the arbitral award has to be passed within 1 year from the date the pleadings are complete. What are pleadings? Filing of statement of claim and statement of defense. Once you file it, the pleadings are complete. Within 1 year, the arbitrator will have to pass a judgment. Here, mind you, the judgment passed by the arbitrator is called as award. We call it AWARD award. It is not a judgment, it is an award. Now, the award of the arbitrator must come within a prescribed statutory period. Earlier, there was no statutory period. On the contrary, Civil Procedure Code, let us examine this vis-a-vis CPC. CPC says after the arguments are closed, the court must pass a judgment within 30 days in open court. Here, there was no time limit in 1996 Act. But now, 2016 amendment makes it clear that after the pleadings are over, pleadings are complete, within the period of as I told you, prescribed period of time, 1 year, the award has to be passed. But there is an exception to it. It says that if it is not possible for the arbitrator to pass an award within a period of 1 year, then parties might extend the period. Can you extend the period in court? No, it is as per law, CPC, because CPC is strictly applicable there. But here, CPC is not strictly applicable. Therefore, what it said, the parties may tell the court, all right, you take 6 more months. So how many months in total? 18 months in total is the time period within which the arbitrator will have to pass an award. Beyond that, the arbitrator's tribunal, the job will be terminated. Okay, so if arbitrator does not pass an award within a period of 18 months, normally it is 12 months, can be extended by 6 months. So 12 plus 6. If it is beyond that, the mandate of arbitrator will be terminated. His job is over. Now the parties might again go to the High Court, and there are several remedies which are available, which we will not go into. Right? So this is how the 1996 Act was found to be short of, and therefore by the recommendations of Justice Sri Krishna's committee, 2016 and 19, the act came to be amended, and these errors were sorted out by the Indian Parliament. Now we move on to section 34. Now the arbitration award is passed. Arbitration award, if passed, and suppose one of the parties is not satisfied with the award, what can it do? It can approach the ordinary court of civil jurisdiction, principal court of ordinary civil jurisdiction, to correct the award. Right? Now this calls for a lot of discussion, and we can actually discuss section 34 for 3-4 sessions. But I'll just give you an idea as a student of law. You have to understand the gist of section 34. Section 34 says that marginal heading of the section 34 is application for setting aside award. Kindly pay attention to the words used by the legislature. The legislature uses the word application. It does not call it appeal. It does not call it review or revision. It calls it application for setting aside the award. Award passed by whom? Award passed by the arbitrator. Here I will want to tell you one thing, that the arbitrator's award for the arbitration purposes is final. But if one of the parties is aggrieved, they can knock the doors of under section 34 of the Act of 1996, saying that, look, the award falls short of A, B, C, D grounds which are mentioned in section 34. There are several grounds which are mentioned in section 34. One of the ground is if the arbitration agreement is arbitration award is not in accordance with public policy of India. Now, what is public policy? That is several times decided by the Supreme Court, right? So if the award is, not in consonance with A, B, C, D, 5 grounds are given. If the award is not proper on the count of any of these grounds, the court can set aside the award. But please pay attention. While doing so under section 34, the court cannot replace its opinion for the opinion of arbitrator, right? Court cannot reappreciate the evidence. What is appreciation of evidence? Evidence is a process of gathering proof, right? Gathering facts. Now, during the process of evidence, both the parties wants to strive upon the mind of the judge or the arbitrator that, look, I am right. This is the evidence. This is the evidence. After the evidence is over, what the judge does, the presiding officer evaluates the evidence, sees on whose favor the evidence is, in whose favor the evidence is, or where the balance of convenience lies, and accordingly gives the decision. Here, in appeal, in several appeals which we call appeals or petitions or whatever, the courts can reappreciate the evidence. Court can see whether the appreciation of evidence done by the lower court is right or wrong. They can reappreciate. But in case of Section 34 Arbitration Act, there is a minimal intervention by court. If I may remind you of Section 5, the thread of Section 5, excuse me, is still continued. Section 34 has not forgotten that Section 5 exists, and it says that only on the grounds mentioned in this provision, the award can be set aside, right? So the law is clear. By way of amendment, now 2016, subsection 2A is added, and it says that in addition to the grounds mentioned in Section 34, if at all there appears patent illegality appearing on the face of arbitration award, then the arbitration award can be set aside. To give you an example, arbitration award can be set aside if it is against public policy of India, if it is against any law in existence, in force within the territory of India, and the additional ground is there is patent illegality on the face of the award. But while setting aside the award, the court cannot reappreciate the evidence. Court cannot say that arbitrator should have considered the evidence in a particular manner. It cannot do that. It will only examine the award on the touchstone of the grounds which are mentioned only under Section 34 of the Act. And Section 34 is amended in 2016. A new subsection is added which says that in addition to the above grounds, what is the new ground? Patent illegality appearing on the face of arbitral award, right? So this is Section 34. Then comes Section 36, which is important for our discussion. Now, we said that there was earlier a law of 1940, Arbitration Act. Okay. Now, what was the most important fallacy in that law? The most important fault and fallacy in that law was there was no procedure for execution of award. Let me tell you something about CPC. Suppose I file a civil suit, decree is passed in my favor, judgment and decree. Decree follows judgment. Okay. So judgment and decree comes in my favor. What happens is, if that decree is not complied with by the judgment debtor, by the losing party, what can happen? I can knock the doors and file execution proceeding for execution of decree. If the decree is not executed, then that person can be sent to civil prison, and there are remedies available if the decree is not satisfied. His properties can be sold off, so on and so forth. But there was no provision for execution of arbitration award in the 1940 Act, and therefore essentially in the year 1996, Act of Arbitration and Conciliation specifically mandates a provision for execution of arbitration award. What is that provision? That is Section 36 of the Arbitration Act. 36 of the Arbitration Act says that the award of the arbitrator can be enforced as if it were a decree of a civil court. So the award of arbitrator is given a status of decree of the civil court. So the award will be executed as if it is a decree which is passed by the court. Such is the status, such is the impetus, such is the importance given to the award of the arbitrator, which conspicuously was not available in the previous Act of 1940. And therefore, arbitration has become more important, most important rather, because now parties can, easily take the help of arbitration because the award is enforceable as if it is passed by the court. Okay. So Section 36 says that the award of the arbitrator can be executed as if it is a decree of the court. Nothing more to discuss in this. You just have to prove that this is an award of the arbitrator and it is not set aside in appeal or so on and so forth. Then the court will enforce. Then the most important provision is Section 37 of the Arbitration Act. Section 37 of the Arbitration Act talks about appeals. For the first time, mind you, the word appeal is used in the arbitration scheme of 1996. Now what it says that an appeal shall lie from ABCD orders under this act. Let me repeat. An appeal shall lie from ABCD orders under this act to the court to which is from the original decree. Let me explain in layman's language. So if an order is passed by Sessions Court, let me take a civil example. If an order is passed by City Civil Court of Mumbai, a decree is passed, then the order of City Civil Court of Mumbai, decree rather, is appealable before the High Court. Okay, the appeal lies before the High Court of Mumbai, right? So High Court of Mumbai can entertain the appeal. So in the same manner, the section Arbitration Act 1996 section 37 says the appeal against ABCD will lie as if to the court to which the appeal lies in CPC. Appeal lies from the decree, right? So in Delhi, if the appeal from a decree lies to the principal seat of the Delhi High Court, then arbitration award ABCD under section 37 appeal will lie before that court. Let us take example of Nagpur, which is the appellate seat of Bombay High Court. Now, if the principal district judge of Bombay High Court passes a decree, right, it is appealable before High Court. So the orders A, B, C, D passed by principal district judge, those will be appealable before the High Court of Nagpur. So they are taking help of the system which is established under the Civil Procedure Code of 1908, which is still applicable, right, with several amendments time and again. My point under section 37 to tell you is this, that an appeal is available, but appeal is available only against orders which are mentioned in section 37. To give you an example, any order passed under section 9, if I may remind you, the interim relief can be appealed against in view of the provisions of 37. Any order passed under section 34 of the act which we discussed a few moments back, that is application for setting aside of an arbitration award, that can be challenged before the court. This is section 37. And let me tell you that this is your first appeal, okay? Because what you had filed before under section 34 was not an appeal. It was an application. It was just an objection to the award. And what you are doing under section 37 is an appeal for the first time. And that appeal is only a first appeal. And let me tell you very clearly and honestly, unlike other laws, the section 37 makes it clear that there shall lie no second appeal against the order passed under 37, right? So there is no second appeal available. In the matters of civil disputes, you have second appeal, right? Then first appeal, second appeal, like you have a civil suit, first appeal, second appeal, and then civil appeal before the Supreme Court. Second appeal is essentially before High Court. But in the matters of arbitration, award of arbitrator, section 34 before the court is not an appeal, it is an application. 37 before the appellate court is an appeal. You stop there. If you're aggrieved by the order of the appeal, that is the first appeal under 37. Mind you, you can only knock the doors of Supreme Court under Article 136 of Constitution, that is special leave petition. There is absolutely no second appeal. Now, what must be the jurisprudential logic behind this? The philosophy of law behind this is that, look, already I want easy disposal of my matter. Already I want to avoid the time which I otherwise consume in the court of law in normal civil proceedings. So adding one more appeal to it might kill few more years of my important contractual obligation, contractual rights, and therefore the second appeal is not specifically provided. Award, objection, that is application 34, 37 appeal, then you go before the Supreme Court, that is under Article 136 by way of special leave petition. This is how the setup of Arbitration Act under part 1 of the act is done. With amendments, we have discussed that. Then I told you that there is new part added to the Arbitration Act, and that is part 1A. We discussed it when we were discussing section 11. We said that Arbitration Council of India is established, and what is the function? It has got two-folded function. One, to recognize the institutions of arbitration, and two, to grade the arbitrators whether they are competent or not. Okay, and with this we have another part of arbitration, that is part 3, which talks about the what you call it, the conciliation part, right? It talks about conciliation as in part 1, part 2. Sorry, I forgot to explain part 2. Part 1 is arbitration. Part 1A is Arbitration Council of India. Part 2 is enforcement of foreign awards. Now, this is something where, you know, most of the times I have seen students getting confused. See, with 1996 Act of Arbitration and Conciliation, we have essentially recognized in our system something called as international commercial arbitration, right? By the word itself, you know that international would essentially mean that one of the parties is not India. Okay, so we want to, you know, bring in the idea of international arbitration into our law, and therefore for enforcement of the awards which are passed outside India, can those awards, can those judgments, as we call it, be recognized in India? So the Arbitration Act of 1996 makes it clear. It says that, look, international commercial arbitrations are recognized, awards passed are recognized. Those awards are called as foreign awards. If the seat of arbitration, seat, venue, section 20, please have that in mind. Enercon, Samshin, all these judgments. So seat, venue, place is it, if it is not India, and if it is an award which is passed outside the boundaries of India, then it is a foreign award. And this foreign award is recognized in the Act of 1996, and the Honorable Supreme Court has time and again said that these awards can also be enforced in view of the provisions of Part 2 of the Act of 1996. Part 2 of the Act is divided into 2 chapters. The first chapter talks about New York Convention. Second chapter talks about Geneva Convention. Geneva Convention came prior in time, then came New York Convention. Now, what are these convention? Convention generally means agreements, right? Between the units, between the states, right? So few states come together, countries come together and agree on a particular subject. So in New York and Geneva Convention, the parties to the agreement, to the convention, have agreed upon the procedure of enforcement of foreign awards. They said, suppose there is an arbitration agreement between the countries which are party to a particular convention, how that award will be enforced. So they have laid down the rules. So if there is a foreign award, and if the parties are agreeing to New York Convention, then their foreign award will be executed in the light of the provisions of New York Convention. And if the parties are agreeing to Geneva Convention, their foreign award will be executed in line with, in consonance with the provisions of Geneva Convention. So this is all about that. But let me tell you, UN-CITRAL model, that is United Nations Convention on International Trade Law, 1985 model, is very clear. It has mandated, I told you that our law of 1996 absolutely bases itself upon the 1985 model of UN-CITRAL, and the preamble of the act itself makes it clear. It is very easy to understand. Now, the provisions relating to New York Convention under the UN-CITRAL model are as it is adopted in the Indian Act of 1996, Arbitration Act. So the manner in which they have provided for execution of the foreign award, the same manner is reproduced under Part 2 of the Act of 1996. Sum and substance, bullet point is this, that if a foreign award is to be executed, yes, it is recognized within the territory of India. It can be executed, enforced, but in which manner? In the manner in which parties have agreed themselves, right? Suppose I want it to be enforced in view of New York Convention, it will be done in that manner. If it has to be done in Geneva Convention, it will be done in that manner. Then comes your Part 3, and that talks about conciliation. For the first time, mind you students, the Act of 1996 has recognized something beyond arbitration. And what is that? That is the concept of conciliation. Now, in layman's language, the court proceedings and arbitration essentially requires, please pay attention on this word, adjudication of dispute. Adjudication grammatically connotes that there is a dispute raised by one person and that is opposed by another person, and they fight before the court on the basis of some evidence, documents, oral evidence, whatever. And upon gathering such evidence, the adjudicating authority, that is the court or the arbitrator, deciding authority, decision making authority, actually gives a decision. It decides, it arrives at a conclusion that, look, you are wrong, you are right. Okay, this is called as adjudication. In arbitration, part 1 of the Arbitration Act of 1996, what happens is adjudication of dispute. The arbitrator adjudicates on the basis of facts, documents, oral and other evidence. But please pay attention, part 3, that is the concept of conciliation, is not adjudication. It is mere facilitation of resolution of dispute, right? What is it? It is facilitation of resolution of dispute without seeing who is right and who is wrong, right? So sum and substance of the entire part 3 is only this as a student of law to understand, because provisions are very easy to understand. Who is the person who will facilitate the settlement? The person is called as conciliator, and the procedure in which, manner in which it is done, the process is called as conciliation. What is conciliation? Settlement or resolution of dispute, not adjudication of dispute, right? So the role of conciliator is to facilitate resolution of dispute, by saying that, all right, you are also right, you are also right, but please, this is the midway, let us do it this way. So across the table, they all sit together, they forget about allegations and counter allegations, and they probably resolve their dispute, do not adjudicate. Conciliator is not the arbitrator. Conciliator is not the judge. He is merely a facilitator of resolution of dispute. He is a midway. He is a midman who, stops both of them. All right, you are right, you are right. Let me find out what can be done. Do you agree? Do you agree? Yes, the dispute is resolved. There is no adjudication as in the manner of arbitration or court proceedings. So part 3 essentially deals with conciliation. Then comes your part 4 of the arbitration, which talks about, which is generally we also don't read such provisions, but as a student of law, you must not leave any provision. Part 4 talks about the miscellaneous provisions, repeals and savings, rule making power of High Court and Supreme Court, rule making power of the government for the purposes of this act. Just to give you an example, every single legislation in our country will have rule making power, right? So rule making power in the case of Arbitration Act is this, that High Courts and Supreme Court and several other High Courts have framed rule for appointment of arbitrator. So you will find Bombay High Court, appointment of arbitrator rules. Delhi High Court, appointment of arbitrator rule. Supreme Court, appointment of arbitrator rules. This rule making power of Supreme Court and High Court is essentially mentioned, provided for in part 4 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act of 1996. All right. Now the act does not stop here. Okay. Let me take you to the any law. I mean, any act, any legislation you pick up. So you will first find the design of the act. What is the design of the act? First, there is a preamble. Then there are parts. Parts comprises of chapters. Chapters comprises of sections and subsections. All right. And there is a third limb which cannot be lost sight of, and that is called as schedules to the act. What are schedules? Schedules are generally details or enlistments which are not mentioned in the provision but are separately given. Let us take example of Constitution of India. 7th schedule talks about list 1, list 2, list 3, state list, concurrent list, union list. Those cannot be mentioned in Article 242, 243, 245. Therefore, those are given in detail in the schedule. What are schedules? Schedules are enlistments, details, right? And those schedules form essential part of a particular legislation. So coming back to the Act of 1996, mind you, there are as many as 8 schedules to the Constitution, one of which is recently added. And these 8 schedules give details about several concepts of arbitration. But again, I would want you to only understand 2 schedules which are recently amended or added. The 4th schedule. The 4th schedule talks about the fees of arbitrator. Now you tell me, do you have a provision in CPC as to how much salary would be paid to a judge? No. Likewise, but see, arbitration is a unique law. You know, we have to compete globally. We have to recognize international commercial arbitration. So we are making everything clear in the statute itself. We have said in Schedule 4 that look, for as this much claim, this will be the arbitrator's fees, right? Just to give an example, suppose your claim is 1 crore rupees. The statute prescribes that whatever, I mean, X amount would be the fees of the arbitrator. Earlier, I do not want to quote the name of the judge, but I am discussing with students. Let me tell you that I had an opportunity to have dinner with a esteemed judge of the Honorable, the then judge of Honorable Supreme Court of India. She told me that she charges 30 lakh rupees per day as an arbitrator. I have myself paid for my clients 15 lakh rupees per day for arbitration. It's a very lucrative career. We are now coming to discuss that. I will tell you, people earn a lot of money by way of the arbitration branch of law. So, you know, this was the situation. Probably because of this, the parliament might have thought it necessary to explain what should be the fee structure of the arbitrator. But, you know, again, remember section 5, minimal judicial intervention, minimal legal intervention. It clearly states, but we have given the schedule, this should be the fees. But if parties otherwise agree, matlab parties decide that no more fees should be paid, if parties are comfortable, the law does not have any problem, right? But normally speaking, what should be the fees of arbitrator? It is on the basis of the 4th schedule, which uses the logic of what is the claim amount and what should be the fees for the claim. All right, this is one schedule. Please keep in mind, this was added in 2016. Okay, then comes another schedule which was added in 2019, very recently. It was added in August 2019. What does it talk about? It is a 8th schedule. 8th schedule now talks about qualification of the arbitrator, right? Earlier there was no such qualification. Now the law prescribes it. Earlier any Tom, Dick and Harry agreed upon by the parties would become an arbitrator. Now it is not like that. Not any Tom, Dick and Harry can be an arbitrator. Arbitrator must have A, B, C, D qualifications. Those qualifications are essentially mentioned in the 8th schedule, which is lastly added to the Act of 1996 in August 2019. What does it do? It prescribes the qualification for you to become an arbitrator, right? So to give you an example, a practicing advocate can become an arbitrator with 10 years of practice minimum. Retired judge of High Court or Supreme Court can become an arbitrator. A registered member of Indian Institute of Chartered Accountants, if I'm not right, I don't know whether I'm giving proper name or not. A competent member of your ICSI, that is Company Secretaries Institution, can become a person to be nominated as arbitrator. So point I'm trying to tell you is that the parliament has made it clear that no, any Tom, Dick and Harry cannot be an arbitrator. These persons who are named here with these qualifications can only become an arbitrator. With this, I think that I have discussed everything which is quite relevant for the purposes of a student of law to understand what Arbitration and Conciliation Act, don't call it Arbitration Act, Arbitration and Conciliation Act is all about. And now with this, let me tell you something which is very important, because I am very sure that you all must have heard a lot about arbitration. Many of the lawyers on Saturday and Sunday are now busy in arbitration, right? And most of the students must have heard that the arbitrations are held in 5-star hotels, internationally in Singapore, Dubai, so on and so forth. I myself do a lot of arbitration. I was always fascinated to this particular branch of law. Let me first tell you, before dreaming your career in arbitration, mind you guys, the Arbitration Act of 1996 only talks about the procedure of arbitration. But arbitration can be of any subject of law. Please try to understand. Arbitration can be of a contract in Sale of Goods Act. Arbitration can be of a contract another commercial law. Arbitration can be in a contract of family in the family disputes, as in property disputes. Matrimonial disputes cannot be entertained. Criminal matters cannot be entertained in arbitration. Those disputes which are arbitrable, okay, can may include, may talk about any law. It is not only about Arbitration Act. Arbitration Act gives the procedure for arbitration. But if you want to make career in arbitration law, first thing you have to understand is, please make yourself conversant with several other laws. Laws like Contract Act, Sale of Goods Act, financial laws, and you have to read the global trend of financial matters. Unless and until you understand the global trend, please note that you cannot make career in arbitration law. With this rider, let me now tell you what all can happen. So there are two branches, domestic and commercial. Now, whenever you study arbitration law or any law in your law school, the focus is always upon the provisions of law, the jurisprudence, a background of law, philosophy of law, and the case laws which are given by the apex court and several other high courts. But this is not where you have to stop. There, if you want to get an edge, you have to do several things in order to make yourself conversant with several laws and to become qualified to take part in the arbitration and other proceedings. All right. So for that, if you want to go in arbitration, please note that you will first have to learn the global trend of economy, right? Then you must be well conversant with all the local laws, that is domestic laws like Contract Act, Sale of Goods Act, as I told you. There are 4 or 5 important things I have jotted down which are very important to obtain an edge in any law. First, you have to set a strategy. You must have a sense of strategy. 1. Number 2, you must, I'm repeating, you must understand commercial contracts, right? Most of the students have never liked Indian Contract Act. They don't like the subject of contract law. Unless and until you know that, please take it that you cannot become a lawyer. You cannot take career in arbitration law. So your foundation is Indian Contract Act 1872. Study well, know that. So understanding of commercial contract. Third is knowledge and of the subject, that is knowledge and insight of a particular subject. Fourth is your ability to express your thoughts. You have to develop that to get an edge. Then now what can you do? Before I tell you what are the actual prospects, there are 2 branches of arbitration if you want to make career in that. One is domestic arbitration, another is international arbitration, or you can make career in both of them. For this, I will advise you to please join the young organizations for young students of law. And there exist such young organizations. I am sure you might not be aware, but there is one very famous such organization recognized by law exists in Delhi. Okay, so I'll just give you the names. First is Young Mumbai Center for International Arbitration. This is in Mumbai. They organize various seminars, webinars. You can take part, present paper, study circle is there. You can take part. Second is, if you want to go into international arbitration, please join Singapore International Arbitration Center. The name is Young Singapore, and this is all free of cost. Young Singapore International Arbitration Center. Third is Young London Court of Arbitration. Fourth is you have a permanent court of arbitration in Delhi, which is very easy for you all to join because you all stay in Delhi. So permanent court of arbitration. Recently in October 2018, they had conducted several programs for the young students, and unfortunately not many of them had joined because people are not aware. So you must also know that. Now to make career, please pay attention that you have to understand the global developments. Track the global developments. How will you track the global development? Arbitration as a special branch of law is developing only in 3 subjects, 3 areas. One is 3 industries we call it. One is construction, right? Second is financial matters, and third is energy. Now you will have to understand what are the laws pertaining to these 3 areas in domestic and international arena. Okay, and you will have to study those laws: construction, financial matters, To give you an example, recently a law has come to India, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, which is called IBC Code. Please pay attention to that. Read that law because it is also based on international systems, right? So you will have to learn that. I'm just giving you an example. Unless and until all these three areas and laws pertaining to them are not known to you, you do not make yourself conversant with that area, you will not be able to make career. But mind you, if you pay just 2 hours every day in these three areas globally, you can excel. Now, what you can do actually, what are the prospects? In domestic arbitration, you can go into litigation, specifically join a firm which deals in arbitration. Please go learn there, join arbitration. Okay. You can go in research, write research papers. You can make research for the arguing counsels in the firms. There are specially researchers appointed for this purpose. So you can do that. Third is, because construction, financial matters, and as I told you, energy, these three sectors need arbitration. Any industry related to these three sectors, say example, banks, non-banking financial institutions, government offices, all these require law graduates who are conversant with arbitration law and global trend. You can join government service, or under a contract, you can join a service in these three sectors. Then coming back to, and you can become a trained arbitrator. You can also become an arbitrator, for which several courses are provided in the institutions which I have named. There is another institution in Kochi, Kerala, which you can join, which is specifically for the purposes of arbitration. Then in international arbitration, you can become an international arbitration lawyer, right? We are proud to say that lawyers from our country, just like Advocate Harish Salve, Senior Advocate Harish Salve, they all do all these international commercial arbitrations, and they are the excellent brains in the field of arbitration, international arbitration. So you can become one, you can become an international arbitration lawyer, and accordingly, for these purposes, you can also join the dispute resolution firms which take part in the process of arbitration. And as I told you that there was an amendment, Arbitration Council of India needs you. If you are well conversant with these provisions of the Act, you are well conversant with the global trend, you are well conversant with the facets of arbitration law, you can easily be attached. You can take help of Arbitration Council of India. There are several posts which are prescribed under Part 1A, which you can apply for. Sum and substance is, there is only one way to reach the pinnacle, and that is to work hard, to take efforts, to understand the law, to understand the philosophy of law, object of law, and to see what is the global trend. I must tell you, as you all know, that arbitration is going to be a celebrated branch of law. It is even today, and all over the world it is going to be that. And for our benefit as Indians, let me tell you that India is going to be a global hub for arbitration. This is not my statement. This is what is evaluated. This is what other countries say. And there are several state centers for arbitration which are being opened now. And all these Arbitration Council of India duties are primarily headed towards that purpose. So I would thank all of you for being patient listeners, giving me an opportunity. I thank Madam Sarabjit Kaur, Madam Alok Sharma for giving me an opportunity, and all organizers and students for the best time I could spend with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chetan. And I must say that the lecture is so comprehensive, and everybody paid so much attention that there is no question at all. I did not find any question here. And you see, I am taking this subject, but I am taking this subject for not very long. So, but some doubts you have cleared a lot also in our mind, because we do not take part 2, etc. We only confine to part 1. So part 2, in one sentence, you have so beautifully explained that is clear. Another point that which you have explained very beautifully, that is the difference between seat, venue, and place. Because generally, the student becomes confused, because seat is very different as far as venue is concerned. Venue can be anywhere where you are meeting, and seat is the applicability of the law to that particular arbitration. So that is a very catchy area, and you have given so many cases. And I must say that that from the very beginning, from preamble to the schedule, you have covered everything so beautifully, so comprehensively, then there is no question in the question box. Generally, students ask so many questions. So I must say that it is one of the best lectures which I have attended on arbitration, and I hope that the doubts of the students have been clarified, and also you have clearly you have mentioned the provisions and also the career prospects, which I did not expect much, because I requested you to emphasize mainly on the law. So you have very beautifully you have explained the law, and side by side the careers prospect from the practical aspect, right?
Yes.
Because you mentioned how, because they have to master the contract act, they have to master the commercial law, they have to confine to the areas where construction is there, energy level. So these areas and these laws, and as you have mentioned in insolvency, I have requested another advocate, and he will come on Friday to discuss the insolvency bankruptcy act. That is also very important. So basically, you have told the student that how they should prepare. This is only a procedural law. Arbitration is a procedural law. But in order to excel in the field of arbitration, they have to master the other laws in which they have to arbitrate. That is wonderful thing which you have mentioned. And I'm very happy that students must be getting so much benefit from it, Chetan. And I must thank Advocate Ankita Rathi, who has suggested your name to me. That is why we could approach to you. I'm very thankful to Ankita ji. Please, thank you very much. She was attendee also here. And on behalf of also, we have a question now. We have a question. Students, you can ask questions, please. So Chetan Goyal has asked a question. Sir, can you suggest what laws are relevant for construction and energy fields?
See, Chetan, there are several laws. Just for example, any commercial or energy contract would primarily be on the basis of Indian contract. 1. Second, there are non-disclosure agreements between the parties. 2. Third, there are energy laws. Now, suppose energy is a very wide concept. You know, take example of coal. Now, for coal, you will have to learn the you will have to understand the coal agreement, right? The agreement between the government and the Coal India Limited. So Coal India Limited enters into an agreement after the Coalgate scam. That contract was renewed as per the directions of the Honorable Supreme Court. So you will have to learn the laws relating to coal block allotment, right? Take example of electricity. If it is pertaining to electricity, you will have to learn the Electricity Act. As I told you, see, as Madam also said, there are several laws you have to understand. So if it is about coal, please get into the coal allocation policies of the government, and then there is something called as coal distribution system. You have to learn those policies and rules and regulation. If it is about mines and minerals, then you will have to learn Mines and Minerals Act. So it altogether, you know, depends upon what kind of contract it is, what area of energy it is. Take example of construction. Again, there are local laws of construction in the states. If we are talking about domestic arena. So in domestic area, you will have, say for example, Maharashtra, we have Maharashtra regulatory authorities, MAHARERA, there are regulatory authorities, Land Acquisition Act, all these you will have to learn. So absolutely, Chetan, it depends upon what area of contract it is. And accordingly, whatever applicable laws are there, you have to do that. You have to read that.
Any other question? Okay, Chetan, I also want to ask one question. There is one doubt, because I have been attending many lectures on arbitration nowadays, sitting in the lockdown period. Yes. So I have attended a lecture given by the Justice Delhi High Court, Justice Jyoti Singh, and she has mentioned that regarding the Schedule 8, there is a confusion whether it has been notified or not. So my question will be that whether the act has the Schedule 8, that is, which talks about the qualification of the arbitrator, whether it has been notified or not. Because even if the parliament passes the law and the president even signs, give the assent by signing it, it is not in operation until and unless it has been notified in the official gazette. So my question will be that. Please.
Your question is very apt, madam. Even I tried to find it out. It was inserted in the Act by way of Section 14 of the Act of 33 of 2019. But as of now, even on the website, there is no information whether it is notified or not. I am really sorry that I could not update you on that, but I am certainly going to.
I have asked this question to many people who are discussing about the arbitration, but there is a confusion. So Madam Justice has said that even I don't know whether it has been notified or not. However, it has become a part of that.
Yeah, in fact, I tried to find out, but the data is not available.
Okay, so people now asking now question. Another question is from a colleague of mine, Ms. Talia Malik. She says, sir, where would you place foreign arbitrators in light of 2019 amendment? The ACI will not recognize them in the light of requirements of 8th schedule. Can they still practice in India?
No, the point is that foreign awards are specially recognized under the separate part, and therefore, insofar as ACI is concerned, ACI is only deals with the institutional arbitration within India. So her question is very right. And as of now, just because it is added recently, we don't have any precedent to comment upon that. But madam, the question is very valid. And in my opinion, the foreign awards cannot be looked at it from the purview, from the point of view of the part 1A, that is Arbitration Council of India, because it has not clearly mentioned whether it will recognize foreign awards or not. But insofar as their enforcement is concerned, as you know, that is separately dealt with.
Part 2.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
So I think we need another amendment for this.
Yes.
Because like Tanya is asking, more people will ask, especially the foreign advocates who are practicing.
Yes. Exactly.
So another question, Chetan, is from anonymous attendee. He is asking, sir, can you please explain the difference between seat and venue with an example? That I think he has already done.
Yeah. But all right, I'll just give you an example.
Yeah.
I was dealing with a Section 11 application before the Honorable High Court of Bombay, and it was on original side. So the agreement stated that the place of arbitration would be Solapur, Maharashtra. But when I approached the court, and the opposite side also approached, by then NERCON's decision had come. So I said, my lord, see, I am not able to go to Solapur because it is very difficult. It is in the inside. I mean, we cannot reach there. So the court said, on the basis of this, what I will decide is that let this Solapur be a place of arbitration, but the seat of arbitration will be in Pune. Right? So the agreement stated that this is a place of arbitration, but the seat of arbitration was changed. The court says that venue can be anywhere, but the place has to be the same. Now it is essentially in view of, international arbitrations, which is relevant for applicability of the law, right? So suppose the place of arbitration is UK, but the venue of arbitration was say US. So which law will be applicable for enforcement? For that purpose, the difference is made in sanction and NERCON for place and venue of arbitration.
Yes, for the sake of clarity, I must say that the law of that place will be applicable where you have fixed the place or seat of the arbitration. Venue is where they are meeting. Suppose we have gone for a conference in New York. And okay, I'm also going, other parties also going, let's have some discussion, some meeting there in New York. New York will be a venue. But if suppose seat is the UK, then it will be the law of the UK which will be applicable. So that is the question. And kindly go through the cases which is mentioned by Chetan, because those cases are also very important, because you must understand the clear difference between the venue and seat. So venue can be anywhere. Now we are sitting, I am sitting in my place in Delhi, Chetan is sitting in Nagpur. So these are the venues. But which law will be applicable? It is not that important in domestic arbitration. Because in domestic we have common law in India, and except the provisions which are some local laws are applicable, like he has mentioned regarding the construction construction laws. So in those areas, you see the local law, so seat also becomes important in domestic arbitration. But if you talk about the mercantile laws, commercial laws, which are all same throughout the country, I don't think that there will be any difficulty as far as domestic arbitration is concerned. But these things are very important for the international arbitration. Okay, so another question is from Ankita. I don't know whether Ankita Rathi is asking or some other Ankita is there. As you mentioned that there is no second appeal, then what is the remedy if the amount of award is less than 3 lakh, and where an application under section 34 will lie?
No, the question here, whoever the Ankita is, the question she has asked is about the pecuniary jurisdiction. Okay, so we are not on pecuniary jurisdiction. We are essentially on subject matter jurisdiction. Irrespective of what the amount is, the application would lie to the court which is mentioned in section 34, and appeal would lie to the court to which an appeal would ordinarily lie from the decree of that court. I hope I have made it very clear that the question was focusing upon the amount of the arbitration award, and I am saying that the section focuses upon subject matter jurisdiction. Okay, so it is not about the amount, it is about the subject matter, that is arbitration.
Right. So no second appeal in arbitration.
No second appeal.
And for if you want to, you have to go under Article 136, specially petition in the Supreme Court. Yes. Now, our student Chetan Goyal, another very intelligent and bright student of our center, he is saying to Advocate Chetan, thank you so much, sir. It is an excellent guidance from you. So he's basically, another is Pramod Bharadwaj. He's saying, sir, is there any age restriction for an arbitrator?
No, there is no age restriction. Only thing is he should be mentally capacitated and must have qualification to become an arbitrator. That is it.
Okay, so Chetan, we have taken all the questions, and the lecture was so comprehensive that there was very few questions which students could ask. And I thank Ankita ji again for recommending your name for this, a very informative lecture on arbitration. I thank you on behalf of our professor in charge, Professor Sarabjit Kaur, on behalf of Law Center 1 faculty members, on behalf of Law Center 1 students, and on my personal behalf for giving such a wonderful lecture which covers all the aspects of arbitration and conciliation acts with the practical aspects for the students. Thank you so much, Chetan. And if it is possible, definitely we'll ask you to guide our students in future, maybe on the drafting of the arbitration clause. If you can take a session, I will be very happy. I will keep in touch with you for this purpose. Thank you, Chetan.
Thank you.